welcome to the Presto Music Podcast. One of my favourite discoveries from last year was the Hermes Experiment. Not, as you may think, an episode of my favourite science fiction serial, but instead one of the most unusual and creative contemporary music quartets I've encountered. Not only is their name out of the ordinary, their lineup is too, featuring soprano, clarinet, harp, and double bass. They formed in 2014, but last year made their debut on disc with Here We Are, which presented a microcosm of contemporary composition wrapped up in their own unique style. It was deemed to have been a successful experiment by both the Gramophone magazine and our own Presto Recordings of the Year, where I was delighted to see it make our top 10 list. Hot on the heels of Here We Are is their second album, Song, recently released on Delphian Records, and I'm delighted to be joined by the Complete Experiment to talk about the group, the album, and their lives outside the laboratory. First of all, could you please introduce yourselves University Challenge style by telling us who you are and your role within the Hermes Experiment?
I'm Eloise, and I'm the singer in the group, and I'm also the co-director of the group.
I'm Ollie, and I play the clarinet.
And I'm Anne, and I play the harp.
I'm Marianne, and I play double bass with the Hermes Experiment.
I'm Hannah, and I co-direct the group with Eloise.
Can you briefly describe how your group formed and the origins behind your unusual name?
We formed in late 2013 after we all graduated from the same university. And so we all wanted to try out something new and unusual with an unusual combination of instruments, and we thought it would work. And so we formed. Perhaps someone else could talk about the origin of the name.
Well, it sounds very high and mighty, but it was actually that Hermes was the name of the university webmail server. Because when we were brainstorming a name, we all just sort of threw down words that we all had in common, and Hermes was one of them. But then sort of upon further exploration, Hermes is also the god of sort of transitions and boundaries and the messenger and defender of the art. So it does make sense beyond a sort of tenuous email connection.
Was the instrumentation a bit of concern when it came to repertoire? Or much like Field of Dreams, you thought, if we build it, they will come?
No, I don't think it was a concern because we did think about it. I know it seems very random, but when we set up the group, we very consciously thought about having all the elements of the musical structure. So of course we had the voice, which is primarily a melody instrument, and then we thought good to have another melody instrument as well, i.e. the clarinet, and then a harmony and bass. So it does seem very random, but there is some logic behind it. And
you've got an ancient instrument, the harp, a Baroque instrument with double bass, a more modern instrument, the clarinet, and the voice as well. So it goes through history as well.
Yeah, hadn't thought of it like that before.
Well, the album contains not only a raft of new compositions, but also several arrangements by yourselves, ranging from the Baroque, Barbara Strozzi, to the contemporary. Was this an attempt to demonstrate the universality of song through time?
I think that was definitely part of the thinking for the concept of the album. The previous album, Here We Are, was kind of a showcase of what we'd had commission-wise so far. So it was all obviously very new music. But for this one, we really wanted to explore kind of further back in the repertoire and show that we could build on history and show that this arc of song from medieval times up to the things we're commissioning nowadays. So yeah, I think the original concept was we had composers kind of chronologically, but obviously the final order is a bit different, but there's still that thread within the album.
I think part of the idea also was to show that songs can be very different, not just in terms of kind of the historical era they come from or the style, the musical style, but actually that people define songs differently, and as composers both and listeners also. So that's why we have such a range. With the Olivia Chaney is pretty much a pop song. Of course, it's arranged for our forces, so it sounds very different. But comparing that to, for example, Philip Venable's piece, which was actually commissioned for Oxford Lieder, so it was also in its intention meant to be a song or a lead or something that would fit at least that festival. So that was, I think, a big part of the thinking behind the concept.
Well, another strong presence is the presence of female voices, both in terms of the composers and the songs themselves. Another conscious choice?
I would say that's reflective of the fact that there are a lot of amazing female composers that we want to work with, rather than us specifically saying we must commission lots of women, but actually, I mean, it's both, of course, but we just find that there's so many exciting female composers, and we've been working with so many. And anyway, I hate saying female composers, but of course, this was your question. I mean, they're just composers, but yes, I mean, I think it's reflective of the fact that there's just so many strong musicians out there, and we love working with them and want their music also to have a longer life.
The most striking feature on both your albums is the astonishing eclecticism of musical styles represented. Again, another deliberate choice, or, as you said before, just a reflection on the state of contemporary composition?
It's probably a bit of both, actually. We obviously wanted to give people a nice variety of stuff to listen to. And I think exploring the idea of song, one of the joys of going through this project was, discovering how each composer sort of reacted differently to, writing for our group. So what we found is that we have, now quite a large body of repertoire, which people have responded to very differently. So it was just a nice sort of coincidence that we could make this album showing the journey of song, but also the various different ways that people have responded to what a song might mean to them.
And also the group's ability to cut across styles is due to this collection of instruments. Harp we associate with folk music, double bass, classical perhaps, and clarinet with jazz.
Yes, I don't do that much jazz on this album, but I can go there sometimes. Maybe in the future. But it's nice because the instruments sort of interact in very different ways. There's a wonderful piece on the album by Susan Lolivar where the harp actually kind of takes center stage and tunes her harp very specifically to get a sort of authentic Iranian scale and mode that's used in that music, and it gives it a wonderful atmosphere. And then their voice actually becomes part of the ensemble with the clarinet and the bass as a sort of completely different entity. And so it's wonderful to see those different roles being explored.
And we can sample the Iranian sound world on Suzanne Lolivar's Ma Didam now. And Anne, do you play folk music on your harp?
I definitely would never claim to be a folk harpist, no. So that's a very, very different tradition. So I play classical pedal harp. I love folk music a lot, and I love listening to it. And I play arrangements of folk music, but I certainly would never claim to be a folk harpist, no.
And a great balance between the simple and the complex. Is this again another deliberate decision, or just a reflection of the styles, the contemporary styles that we encounter?
I think when you're putting any kind of something together, whether it's an album or a concert program, you're always trying to find a healthy balance between lots of different factors. And weirdly, that often involves quite strong contrasts. I do think that contemporary music does have loads of wonderfully different strands at the moment, and I think that's really healthy and wonderful. And I think there are people, many people, who are actually trying to break down the boxing of things and of genres within contemporary music. And I do think that's a sign of of the times and of where we're at with contemporary music. So I think there's lots of different reasons why, but I think it's partly just trying to create a balanced product. But I do think it's also a reflection of a trend in contemporary music, which is, I think, very healthy and exciting.
And that went into the thought behind the programming of the tracks on the album. You wanted to have a variety within that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Hannah said earlier, to just show how diverse a genre song is. And I mean, we've like only scratched the surface, because song is an art form that crosses every kind of musical divide you can imagine. So broadness and variety was key for sure.
But at the same time, every track has that unique Hermes sound.
Yeah, we can't get away from that, really.
If I can add one thing about the Hermes sound as well, I think what's particular maybe about this album is that we do songs, but we are four, musicians. Often, not always, but there is this tradition that a classical singer often sings with a pianist or maybe another instrument, but it's quite rare actually to have the opportunity to perform songs with three musicians. And I think what we try to convey through the album is that actually it's not just the singer who sings the song, but every musician is equal, and the song is formed by four musicians together, whether it's the harp, the clarinet, the double bass, or the voice that carries out the song element at a particular time in the piece. It's very much kind of equal and shared out, and the combination of sounds as well that creates the sound. And so this sort of Hermes sound that maybe you talk about and other people have spoken about is this, I mean, as far as we know, it hasn't been done before, this combination of four instruments. And so the way we blend and the way the instruments carry out the drama and the narrative in the song as well is very important to us. That's also why we wanted to arrange some existing songs as well, to try and see how we can bring perhaps something new to them as well, and bring out our Hermes sound to those existing songs, which are already amazing, but sort of perhaps break the sort of singer plus instrument stereotype that sometimes happens in the classical music world.
And equality, that's something that's very important to the group.
Yes, definitely.
How have composers reacted when you advise them of your instrumentation? Are they actually quite pleased to be working with a somewhat unusual lineup, rather than feel a burden of expectation if they're writing for a more traditional lineup, like, say, a string quartet?
I think on the whole, they're pretty excited about it. Obviously, it's a first for them, usually composing for this lineup, as much as for us playing it. Very different to composing for a string quartet, obviously, or even for a voice and other instruments, as Eloise has just said, with the wanting us four to be more equal than traditionally. But I think they can also find it quite daunting when they get into it, because there are things you have to negotiate within the combination of instruments, which we also find when we arrange as well. There are areas you've got to be a bit careful in, or registers that you need to make sure you can cover, like, for example, the bass being so low and things like that. And also, obviously, writing for harp is its own challenge, which composers, relish or fear, depending on who they are. But I think on the whole, yes, it's exciting for them. And they also, with this group, they tend to get more performances of their pieces because of our relative lack of repertoire. We tend to play pieces, repeat performances of pieces that they may not get elsewhere.
Has it been sort of difficult booking the Hermes Experiment? What do they play? Soprano, clarinet, double bass and harp. Goodness me, what on earth can you present, with that?
I mean, it was difficult at the beginning, yes, but it's no longer so tricky. And I actually think the albums have really helped, because of course then people can listen to the albums first and they kind of get an idea of what the sound world is like and what the music is like. And I think it becomes a bit less intimidating. So in a way, we've kind of seen a lot more engagement from maybe some, let's say, more traditional classical music institutions over the last year or so, year and a half maybe, because I think we've had more music that they can listen to online or actually through the releases. So, but it was certainly a challenge before, and we did a lot of work putting on concerts ourselves and convincing people to come to listen to begin with. And we've been going for a while now. And
how many commissions have you now made? What's the number?
We're over 60 for sure, but I actually don't know what the real number is.
You've lost count.
No idea, because we also work so much with students. So it's actually, the number is huge, but for pieces we've commissioned for performances, I think it's 60 something by now. I'm not sure.
Maybe in generations' time, there'll be another group with the same lineup that want to play all these great pieces.
I mean, that'd be amazing.
Well, all four of you have made arrangements for the ensemble on the album. What are the challenges of arranging music for your unique ensemble?
Well, I think it's nice because I think we all have our own style of arranging. And when you arrange anything, there's always a balance to strike, I think, between presenting what you want to say with something while also not losing like the essence of the actual piece that you're trying to arrange. So you don't want to sort of mutilate it and end up so that you have something that's completely unrecognizable, but you want to kind of put your stamp on it maybe, and some arrangements we kind of just try and represent more kind of faithfully than others, depending on the style and maybe the event that it's being arranged for. But yeah, there are certain things that you have to sort of be aware of, obviously the ranges of the instruments and things that might look easy on one, like, on a piano part, but then you put it in the harp and it's actually impossible, just because of the way the harp, people often equate the harp with the piano. I mean, I'm sure Anne has a lot to say about that, but it's not the case. And so we all actually, I think, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I personally have learned a lot over the course of our group's existence of how to actually write for the instruments. I look at arrangements I did a few years ago, and each time, we rehearse them and we kind of workshop them ourselves. So we're always sort of learning about each other's instruments and each other's playing as well, because the nice thing is now is I feel like I'm not just arranging things for soprano, harp, clarinet and bass. I'm arranging them for Eloise, Ollie, Anne and Marianne. It's like you get to know people's style and their personality and how they play, and I think that also influences how you approach writing or arranging for this group.
I guess it is something you've had to learn on the fly, as there's no textbook for arranging music for this ensemble. Yeah,
exactly. You try things and some things work, some things don't work. But I feel like that's also, life in general.
Do you feel perhaps a greater license or freedom arranging music composers that have deceased, or is there any difference there?
Yes. I mean, we've all arranged music from a variety of composers of past and present, and there is there is more, I think, of a collaborative like consultation process with a living composer. You can like send it to them and say, what do you think? But again, it's that weird balance of you still want it to be your arrangement, not so you want the composer's blessing, but if they end up changing too many things, then it's sort of it's like, whose arrangement actually is it? And then with the older stuff, it can be a bit more freeing, I guess. And then we decide whether we want to sort of do a more sort of straight up transcription or do something a bit more wacky.
For the arrangements, there's a chance to use extended techniques, perhaps without this feeling gimmicky. I specifically there with regards to the harp being used as a percussion instrument. I guess we don't have a percussion instrument. Well, we can use the percussion from the harp. This is perhaps making a virtue of a necessity in this regard.
I do think that using the instruments more broadly is also just, again, a symptom of the times and a really positive one. But I do think you're right in that obviously there are instrumental roles that we don't have filled in our ensemble, and one of the really fab things we've discovered is the harp and double bass, I should say, rhythm section, which is can be really, really great. But I definitely think there are times we've chosen to use it when we probably didn't need to as well. I think it's a creative choices as well.
Can perhaps be overused if you're not too careful.
I mean, as with any, if you use the same chord too many times, it gets boring as well. So I think it's just yet another musical resource that you have to treat really carefully. And if it's well integrated and it's being used for a reason, then I think it should work.
Would any of you like to say which was the trickiest arrangement?
I think we all find our own things tricky. We all have our own little hang-ups.
I think what's really nice on the album is actually they're all quite different, partly because of the original piece that was arranged, but partly also because, as Ollie said, we all have our own styles, and they all have challenges, but in their own ways. But they're all very distinctive.
I think also we always discuss who's going to do each one. So there are definitely ones that I would have, found much harder to arrange than others. But we tend to sort of say, I'd like to do that one. And so that means you've already probably got some ideas and sort of know how you might go about it. And I think that really helps as well. Because no one's ever, I don't think, put in a position where they're like, oh gosh, I've got to arrange this and I don't know where to start. So again, because we can all do it, it's normally possible to find at least one person who already has an idea of where to start.
Well, Marianne, undoubtedly one of the most virtuosic performances on the album is your performance on Ayanna Witter-Johnson's Draw the Line. What are the challenges behind performing this piece?
It's definitely challenging in the sort of bow choreography department. It meant learning an entire new bow technique, the bow chop, which Ayanna actually uses in her own performing on the cello and singing, as she does so well. So I had to learn how to do this percussive effect. It's basically a sort of a sharp crunch sound with the bow, where it's like a drop on the string that produces this percussive effect. Again, another extended technique for the bass and compensating for the lack of percussion. But it works so well in her piece. And there's also, she combines that with ricochet strokes with left-hand pits. And it's all happening within seconds, it's all very close together. So just getting your brain around that was the initial challenge.
And let's hear Marianne's performance on Draw the Line. And you've been leading the Hermes Experiment's virtual song competition. Can you explain the project and the role that musicians have in commissioning new music, both by composition students and professional composers?
So this was our educational project that we ran alongside our album. So it was called the Song Virtual Composition Project, or VCP. And so alongside the album, we wanted to give state school students the opportunity to create music with us, basically. And as we mentioned before, song is such a wonderfully accessible and diverse genre that it seemed a really good theme to do this project with. So we worked with students from 4 different schools, and it was all took place online. So it was very much designed for the pandemic times. And they submitted some wonderful songs to us, and then we gave them feedback, and then they resubmitted. And then as the final product, we created an online song gallery, which is still up online. If you just go to YouTube and type in Hermes Experiment online song gallery, or you can go to our website and access it from there. They're all still there, these amazing songs. And the really nice parallel with the album was the incredible range of styles that we received from these fantastic students. To answer your question about musicians' role in commissioning music, I think every musician has a duty to at least investigate the music of their time. Obviously, some people really love playing contemporary music and some people don't specialise in it, and that's absolutely fine. But I think musicians do have a role to play for sure in commissioning. Obviously, sometimes it happens through lots of different systems in the music world, but it's a really important thing to do. And it also depends on, what exact role you're in, because in our virtual composition project, we're of course musicians, but we're also educators in that context. And so for us, it was about commissioning new music from a young generation, of course, but it was also about offering an educational opportunity. And, music can do that. It can sort of feed through in lots of different ways. So I hope that sort of makes sense.
And those young composers completely aren't phased for writing for such an unusual combination. They don't even think twice.
Well, I think that was one of the wonderful things, is that when you work with young musicians, they often don't have the stereotypes that we have already ingrained.
Preconceived ideas about musical form, etc., etc.
Yeah, there were so many wonderful ideas and, so many textures that came through that we'd never thought of before, purely probably because, they're thinking from a totally new perspective, which was really wonderful. So no, they weren't phased, and they submitted some absolutely fantastic songs. So it was great.
And Anne says you can listen to those songs on Hermes Experiment's YouTube channel. Now, Oliver, you featured on 2 discs, which made Presto's top 10 last year. Here We Are, and on the performance of Mozart's Grand Partita with Mark Simpson. Is it especially important for you that you play both contemporary and classical music?
Yes, yeah, it was a fun year. I feel very lucky to have actually been part of both projects, quite different in some ways, but actually more similar than you might think. I always think about this sort of distinction between sort of classical and contemporary, and I don't like thinking of the two styles as kind of, diametrically opposed. I do think that if you're passionate about music, that will come across in kind of whatever style you choose to inhabit. There were things about recording Mozart that were very contemporary. The other things you can find in Mozart are very contemporary, and there were things on our album that are very classical, actually, and the way that you have to phrase or think about voicing or think about sound quality, they're all things that apply, I think, to anything that any style of music. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy playing all sorts of different things, and I try and sort of take as much as I can from each different style. But I do think that music most genres share more things than they don't once you scratch kind of below the surface of like the actual sounds. And it's I got one of my, personally speaking, one of my hopes for our albums and for our work is to kind of show people that the work that we do in the music we make, you can actually hear it and enjoy it without needing to know lots of things, which I think is still a bit of baggage that contemporary music has. And I was thinking actually earlier when Hannah was talking about the early days having a hard sell, contemporary classical music still has this kind of association. I think, contemporary must mean inaccessible, or difficult or intellectual or challenging. And it can be challenging, it can be interesting, but it's not it's not exclusionary, much in the same way that it's just in how you play it and how you present it. I've seen performances of the other night, actually I saw a performance of a Bach double concerto for oboe and violin that was just totally electrifying and really, and because it was played by people who were totally brilliant and were really giving everything. And I've seen performances of Bach that kind of made me want to fall asleep. and it's the same thing for contemporary music. I think we can all think of experiences where we've had, we've watched things that have left us totally like energized and passionate, and other things that don't leave us. And I think it's more in the presentation and the approach. And I think that's what we try and do as a group. We talk to the audience. We try not to take ourselves too seriously. We take the work very seriously, obviously, but
try to take the audience with you on the journey. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's without an audience, it's like, well, why are you making music? Because that's what music's there for.
Well, Eloise, one of the more avant-garde pieces on the album is Kerry Andrews' Fruit Songs, in which I gather the score has some rather strange demands on your vocal technique.
Yeah, it's fun. I get to fake being drunk, which is always quite relaxing, especially when we perform. Whenever I get to that song, there's in Cherry, where there's a moment I have to pretend being a fat policeman and then a drunk person and fainting, and that's always a moment where I could actually breathe and just go for it. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, Anne has arranged those fruit songs. So obviously, in the original songs, there were already, I mean, the extended techniques were very much there in the vocal part. But what's really fun actually is Anne has arranged those songs for Hermes, and so actually has also added some kind of similar extended techniques in the instruments as well. In particular, I mean, actually in all the instruments, there's some really, really fun sounds, and so it's really fun to kind of bounce off those as well. So it's not just the vocalists who does wacky things, but actually everyone has their moment. And that's really fun, and yes, I love it.
We can have a quick excerpt of Eloise's impersonations now. Here's Cherry from Kerry Andrews' Fruit Songs.
Yoshino is all I can say for the cherries that grow on my tree.
Well, you are a composer yourself, Eloise, but none of your albums have yet featured any one of your own compositions.
No, coming soon, coming out next June with quite a few of my compositions on it.
And your performance of Fruit Songs there, that does tie into your work outside the group?
Yes, I guess especially the blackberry and cherry in the Fruit Songs, they're maybe the most sort of theatrical ones that use not only voiced sounds but kind of wacky sounds and theatrical gestures, which is something I love to do in my performances and in the sort of music I write, especially the vocal music I write. It often has a sort of theatrical element that doesn't only involve singing beautifully.
Well, aside from that, what are your future plans?
Lots of things coming up. Probably not allowed to reveal everything, but if you keep an eye on our, all the socials, then you'll be for sure kept updated. Quite a few exciting plans for next year and the following year as well, with some really exciting composers and quite big collaborations in the pipeline. And I guess also we'll be performing all of those beautiful songs live more and more. So we've already had the chance to do so a little bit in the last couple of months, but we have quite a few sort of summer festivals booked in for next year, where I think we'll be able to showcase more of those songs that feature on the album. I'm very excited for what comes next. I think what's really fun with Hermes is that we, anything is possible, and if we decide to do something, then we can do it, providing that then we put the work in and sort out all the administration side and the funding. But we can come up with the projects we want to do, and then we do them. So I'm super excited for all those upcoming projects and the ones we haven't thought of yet, but might pop up in our minds over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think as a group, we just want to keep on discovering new things, making music, and on an individual level as well. It's much the same. I think we all bring things from the other strands of work that we do to Hermes, and it then reflects back out to the work that we do elsewhere. So I think it's a nice sort of symbiotic get up that we've got going, which I really enjoy.
I think one of my hopes for Hermes as well in the future is to again run the song virtual composition project was our first self-run large scale sort of educational project, and having done that and learnt all the lessons from that and there's still so much more to learn. Definitely hope that we can run more similar and different education and community projects in the future as well. That's definitely a hope I have for Hermes.
Yes, I definitely agree with Anne that as we're slightly further on in the group's career, if I can call it that, than we were when we started, I think we're now at the position where kind of mentoring and education things are going to be more part of our work, which we're all really excited about.
Well, I look forward to continuing to seeing the results of your unusual experiments, both within the group and without. Song and your debut album, Here We Are, of course, available from Presto Classical. Thanks to all 5 of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks to my producer, Matt Groom, and thanks to you for listening.